Hello, and thank you for watching my on-demand session, Redefining Success by Working Less and Working Harder. I want to talk a lot about, the way that we fill our time in between the meetings that we have and the projects that we have, and make the case for reclaiming some of that time for yourself, for your own mental health, and to keep you from getting burned out from work. These are things that I feel very passionate about, and that have worked for me and friends and family. And so I'm kind of excited to share some of my thought process with you here. This is who I am. I'm not going to go through all of this. I work for a really cool company called Signos. We focus on metabolic health, which is great because it's part of what I'm so interested in, and keeping the mind really, really sharp. But most of you will know me from being an Email Geeks admin. You may pick up on some of the things that I mention here as stuff that I've kind of yelled about in Email Geeks before. And so for those of you who have heard me say some of this, I apologize in advance. I hope you get something out of it. All right, so our agenda is simple. We'll go over why you're probably an addict, why our days are fundamentally broken, the types of stress that we can experience, and then I'll give you kind of a four-step way of reevaluating how you spend your time, and hopefully reclaim some of it for yourself. And then at the very end, I'll give you a mission of fun things to do to get you stressed out, but the good kind of stressed. So 8-hour labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest is a phrase that was coined by Robert Owen as part of the 8-hour workday movement over 200 years ago. And we spend a lot of time talking about this today because we all believe that we should be working less than 8 hours. And I couldn't agree more. The fact of the matter is, though, research shows that we actually spend closer to 4 to 5 hours a day doing solid work, and some estimates are even lower than that. The 4 to 5 is generous, and so it's between 2 to 5 actually of solid work that we're doing, and in between all of the things that we're doing things that give us really, really quick dopamine hits, such as popping over to read CNN or Fox News in the middle of the day, or reading about a hurricane hitting California, which hasn't happened in decades, and checking social media, looking at other people's vacations, and all of this is fantastic and made able by the internet, which is a great tool, but it's actually causing us to become a little bit of dopamine fiends. So dopamine is necessary in order to live a good life. And so every time we do this, we get a little bit of a dopamine hit, and it's the same dopamine hit you would get if you spent an entire day out in the sun. It's the same dopamine hit that you might get if you nourish your body really well, if you get a really good workout. But it's faster because it's the internet. I can go on Instagram, I can find something to like, or somebody's vacation, or a post from a friend from high school. But I can also spend it and try to get those dopamine hits by reading about the political environment, or a volcano that erupted halfway around the world that isn't actually adding any value to my life. And so we do this, and we do this a lot. And so it's kind of made us all a little bit of an addict. You're probably a dopamine addict. We all are. Like I said, it's necessary to live our lives. Dopamine is an absolute must. But the way that we're getting it is in a more rapid state than we ever have before. There's a really great book called Dopamine Nation that I've read, honestly, only part of, but I do recommend everybody read it because it talks about this problem and how it's caused us some issues. But there are really healthy ways of getting dopamine, and there are really unhealthy ways of getting dopamine. And I asked some people in Email Geeks recently, when was the last time that you felt just absolute pure pleasure, just felt fantastic? And the answers that I got were all really healthy ways of getting dopamine, which was interesting. So Leslie said, I played hooky to go skiing with my family. And she said, as a side note, that she thinks that playing hooky was actually part of it, which is funny. I totally understand that. Newt walking on the beach and just, not worrying about any obligations. Brian said basketball, which is great physical movement, haircut, which is self-care, a mangonada, which, great if you love them. And then a Nickelback concert, which I'm sure not would be not everybody's dopamine hit of choice, but Brian went to see a Nickelback concert, and frankly, it probably would give me a dopamine hit too, because it's fun spending time with family, and Nickelback's a throwback, man. Um, and Stephanie said, I was in St. Martin, and I was floating on the water and eating beer and chicken, or drinking beer and eating chicken. And that's a great way to get it as well. You're getting tons of sun, you're in the water, you're relaxing, but also you're enjoying, a little bit of things that you may not on a normal basis, and probably a healthier way. But nobody here said that it's from reading the news, and nobody said it's from staring at my phone, or ignoring my family, or looking at Instagram, or watching TV, or getting overly upset about the Real Housewives. And I think that that's kind of the point here, right? Is we have a tendency to feel pleasure whenever we do things that are actually enjoyable, and the dopamine hit that we're getting throughout the day, whenever we're filling our time with things that don't matter, is not the thing that we'll remember later. And so we're getting the dopamine, but it's not going to last, and it's not going to give us fulfill us the way that we want it to. So our days are fundamentally broken. Our time at a computer, which most of us here, are working behind, probably look a little bit like this. And so the calendar on the left is probably closer to what mine looks like. Honestly, right now it's probably twice as many meetings. But on the left is an example of what a designer or developer might experience. And sure, there might be less meetings for a designer or a developer, but the way that they're structured out is more problematic. It's really hard for a designer or a developer to get into the middle of coding something or designing something, and then be ripped away and have to go focus on something else. And then you've got to get your creative mind back in that place. And it's not very different for a strategist. If I'm building out a roadmap, I can't do that with a 30-minute pocket of time in between my Monday or my Wednesday meeting. And so what we end up spending our time doing is wasting it. And so all the time in between these meetings, if I can't build out a roadmap, or I can't design an email, or push something out, or get a new push notification in place, for example, I spend it doing things that don't really matter. And research shows these are the things that we're doing. We're spending over an hour a day reading the news. We used to have a 1 hour of news at night that we would check in and figure out, what's going on in our neighborhood. And now you have a 24-hour news cycle that's just sucking the life out of you slowly. Social media, 45 minutes, we're observing other people's highlights that they post online, and not paying really any attention to what's going on around us. Chatting with coworkers, not necessarily the most unhealthy, but you probably could do that in a different way. Searching for new jobs. I think that's self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through all of these. Taking a smoke break is probably the last one. You get a few minutes away from your desk, you get outside for a few minutes, and you get nicotine. Like, that is a very easy dopamine hit. But ultimately, we're not spending as much time at work as we think that we are. We're just behind our desk for 8 hours a day. And because of this, we're all living in a state of stress, which makes perfect sense. You're intaking information that has really nothing to do with your life, and it's not adding any value to it. And you worry about the California hurricane, and you worry about the floods in Europe, or whatever the case may be. And you're getting that dopamine hit, but at the same time, you're taking in all of that stress for yourself. And that sucks. It doesn't make anybody feel any good. And so I want to take a moment to talk about the actual two types of stress. So you have distress, which we all know. Distress is the way that I feel when I think about voting. It's the distress whenever I think about a big project that I have to do that I'm absolutely dreading. Eustress, though, is complete opposite. So distress is I got into a car accident, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. Eustress is usually something that you create. And so eustress might be, I went out for a hike, and it was really hard on my body, but it felt wonderful. Eustress is I worked on a really long project, and whenever I presented it at the company, it went fantastic, and I'm thrilled about it. And distress is I got called into a meeting right whenever I was about to launch something, and now I have to work late. And so these are important because we can actually start to cultivate the types of stress that we want to have in our lives. And so instead of spending those 30 minutes in between meetings or an hour in between meetings or the first 45 minutes of your morning staring at your phone, which is, looking at the news or worrying about things that aren't ultimately going to affect you, you can actually start to use them to create eustress in your life, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Um, the the big call out here, the opposite of stress is not calm, it's complacency. And a lot of people think, well, if I could just eliminate all of the stress in my life, everything is going to be better. I'm going to go on vacation and there's going to be no stress. And that's fundamentally not true. Stress is a necessary part of our lives. But we get to decide what kind of stress it is. And so the true opposite of stress is complacency. I feel all of this stress, but I'm going to do nothing about it, because you're never going to outrun stress. You might get some rest from it. You might get a break from it, but there's always going to be another thing that comes up. And so I like to say that stress is not the opposite of stress is not calm. It is complacency. It's refusing to do anything about it. It's refusing to address the things that are negative stress, and then refusing to add more eustress in my life. So let's talk about how you actually start to find these moments that cause distress and turn them into eustress moments, so that you can start to reclaim some of that time in your day that you say that you spend working when it's probably actually just taking energy away from you. They're kind of 4 steps. I've never put names to these before. Notice / full time and focus. They're just for fun. But these are the steps that I actually think about whenever I'm going through and editing my days on a consistent basis to ensure that I'm giving back to myself. There is one ground rule. That ground rule is you can cause 0 pain. And the importance of this rule is you can't suddenly decide to quit your job and let your spouse take care of everything. You can't, quiet quit at work and let your coworkers pick up all of the slack around you. You can't take all of your money out of the bank and go to Vegas for one awesome weekend to get as much dopamine as possible and then come back and have to pick up the pieces, right? So you have to cause 0 pain for the people around you and for yourself. And you'll see why. So the big first step is starting to notice. You have to start to notice the things in your life, especially in your work, that are taking away from your energy. And so my therapist always says, if you are having a bad day, become curious about it. What is the source of that stress, or that perceived badness? And so you kind of have to look at everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis and figure out the pockets of time that you're spending doing things that are just depleting. They give nothing back to you. So I noticed that if I have 30 minutes, and this is why I say it so much, if I have 30 minutes in between meetings, I'm probably going to spend it flipping through Instagram or checking out the news, or I'm going to flip through my personal inbox and realize that I have 179 unread messages, and it's going to stress me out. Also start to think about the useless meetings that you're in. And I don't mean useless in that they have no value to the org. I mean, they have no value to you. And so if you're participating in them, you might be just giving up 30 minutes of your time that just isn't necessary. Cold emails, you get the emails from salespeople. They always have an unsubscribe link in them. You never use it. Telemarketers, what phone calls are you picking up and dealing with throughout the day? And then even the tasks at home, in the middle of the day, you might have to deal with taking the dog outside. What is the thing that you don't want to do? And the goal here is not to change anything. It's just to start to become a stress investigator. So you're finding these things in your work and at home that are literally sucking the life out of you. The next step is to start slashing things. So pick one thing and just take a dagger to it. So if you have a meeting that you have no purpose being in, just go to your manager if you require manager's approval and say, I'm not going to go to this anymore. I don't get anything out of it. 9 times out of 10, your manager, based on your salary alone, is going to say, I totally would like to get the cost that I have to pay you to be in that half-hour meeting back. I'd rather you be working on things that actually matter. If you have meetings that you've set up that have no value, it's a weekly recurring touch base on metrics, and half the time it gets canceled, just take it off of your calendar, because the time it takes you to cancel it in the first place is just taking away energy. You can turn off your Zoom camera, if you're tired of being on camera all the time. And for women, I know it's a big deal to have to get up and do your hair and get dressed and all of that. Turn off your camera for a day. Like, who cares? If you have an email that you send weekly, that you don't even know if your customers are getting any value out of, stop doing it. Or if somebody stops saying thank you for a report, stop sending it. I did this actually at a major sporting goods company several years ago, where they said that they needed weekly metrics on how the email plan was performing. And I would send it and nothing would happen. And so I just quit sending it. And after about a couple of weeks, somebody came to me and they were like, oh, I just need to know what the database growth is. Well, that was a really easy metric to give them. And so I just stopped doing it. So your goal here is to just take one of the things from the list that you kind of previously established and take it out. Just remove one of those items. And then, do it again. Get really good at like slashing things that just don't really add any value to your day. The third one is a little bit harder, and I recognize that. This is probably the hardest of all the 4 steps. Start to full time, no big deal. And the thing that you're trying to do here is figure out which tasks you do that are probably not as valuable as your time is, right? So I'm not saying, outsource your job if you work from home. And I'm not saying find somebody else to do it whenever you're at the office and just pretend like you're working. What I'm saying is, if there's a task that you fundamentally hate, a manual list upload, an email that gets sent every week, figure out a way to automate that thing or pass it off to somebody else who can handle it just as well as you can. There's probably somebody in your organization who will happily upload that list that you don't want to deal with anymore, and they'll be happy to get the exposure into a different tool. You can ask your analytics team to automate a report. You can ask your manager I did this recently, you can ask your manager to get Parcel or Plot to host all of your emails and make building easier, or a way for Plot was really great for allowing our organization visibility into the emails that exist out there today. They'd say, oh, can you send me the entire flow for, and like, no, I can't. But now I can, and I don't have to deal with those requests as they come up, which is pretty much weekly. Automate low value tasks. Zapier is great for this, but there are obviously other workarounds. If you don't have ideas, you can always ask some peers for how to automate some of that stuff. Go to your manager whenever you have too many tasks on your plate and figure out how to reprioritize. Basically, what you're doing is you're trying to outsource some of the work. You're trying to get tools for another portion of the work, and another portion you're just going to drop. And for me, it was about 1/3 of each one of those buckets. But your mileage may vary. It may turn out that you're doing a lot of hand-holding and stuff that could really be automated, and it makes life so much easier. So you're trying to create more time. And I say that to say, I also know that a lot of people are going to have a really hard time with delegation. They're going to have a really hard time with asking a coworker to help them with a project. They're going to have a hard time telling their manager they need a tool. They're going to have a lot of trouble with this, because it feels like, to a lot of us, that the more we keep on our plate, the more important and needed we are in the organization. And I am here to tell you, as both an employee and a manager, that is not true. The more you can get off of your plate, the more you can take on projects that actually have meaning. But we think that, oh, well, if I pass this off to somebody, they're not going to like me. Or if I ask for this thing, my manager is going to be upset with me. And so I am here to tell you about the Ben Franklin effect. The Ben Franklin effect is a phenomenon in which Ben Franklin noticed if he somebody that was that he asked a favor from before is more likely to do a favor for him again. And it's because somebody who does you a favor cannot not be your friend. It's not possible for them to not like you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing you the favor. And so there's a lot of very famous books who that mention this. But if you have an enemy, you give them or you ask them, hey, would you mind doing this thing for me? And that person has to endear themselves to you. Otherwise, there's some cognitive dissonance there where they're doing you a favor even though they can't stand you. And so if you're worried about alienating people, or you're worried about losing friends, or you're worried about your manager being upset with you, all data points show that is very unlikely to happen, because somebody wouldn't help you out if they didn't actually care about you to some degree. Cool. So what do you do with all this newfound time? You've gone through your list. You've identified the points of things that you could drop off. You have figured out, how to slash some of them. You have outsourced some of them. You have automated some of them. Great. Now you have time back. I don't think the answer here is to go and spend more time trying to fill with other projects. I think that you will spend some time filling that with projects, or fill that time with some projects. But the vast majority of us need to spend more time focusing. And whenever I say focus, I mean on yourself. I mean in the pockets of 30 minutes that you have in between meetings, or the 15 minutes that you have at the end of the day. I say get away from your desk. Go take a walk whenever you're trying to figure out a hard problem. If you are in office or you live near coworkers, instead of having a weekly meeting, go for a walk together, which, by the way, is still a meeting. It's just not in a conference room. I think that, you can choose to get away from your desk and reclaim some of that time for yourself and do something healthy. Your brain can still be firmly in work, and that's fine. But I think the goal here is to disconnect ourselves from our desk a little bit, where we end up going for these really quick dopamine hits that aren't really solving any problems. I do a mask while in a Zoom meeting. I've totally done this. I've only ever done it once if my manager is watching. If my manager is not watching, the truth is I've done it 3 or 4 times. I'll turn Zoom off and I'll put the little eye things underneath my eyes, or put one of those, oh God, what are they called? Like sheet masks over my face. For a little bit of self-care. I'm having a rough day. I know that I've got a hard meeting coming up. I'm taking that Zoom call. I'm there, and I'm going to do something for myself at the same time. Choose water over caffeine. We spend a lot of time drinking a lot of caffeine. Americans do. And it's actually not necessarily great for you. It's a little bit dehydrating. It's keeping you up later at night. It actually, the caffeine itself, because it's simulating kind of a stressful environment, it speeds up your heart rate, it speeds up your breathing. It can make you feel more stressed out than you actually are. I quit caffeine about 5 years ago for that reason. Read a book in the morning, like an actual book, rather than looking at your phone or looking at the news or reading Reddit or checking Facebook. Escape to something else. And it doesn't have to be fiction. Just spend some time looking at something that's a non-screen. Eat something green. Everybody could use more lettuce. Basically, what you're trying to do is start to care for yourself in the downtime that you have. And what you'll start to notice as you fill in the pockets of time that you have in work is, yes, you still have an 8-hour day, and yes, you're still doing the amount of work that you need, or you're spending the amount of time that you need in order to get your work done. But you're reclaiming some of that for yourself and giving back to yourself so that you're creating stress rather than distress. So your job now is to evaluate each decision you're making, in each task that you're doing. And ask yourself, is this causing you stress or distress? Is this giving back to me? Like, is this a net positive or is this a net negative? And the goal here is that your net positives outweigh your net negatives so that you're avoiding burnout, so that you're avoiding looking for another job when it actually may not be the job. It's just, not taking good care of yourself. You cannot escape distress. It's not possible, but you can prepare yourself for it. So a lot of people, and myself included, will think, well, I know that there's a meeting that's going to happen on every Thursday, and I absolutely hate that meeting, and I never want to go to it, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's the most stressful thing that happens to me. Well, if the goal of the whole thing is to have a net positive towards eustress and not a net positive towards distress, I can take care of myself before I go into that meeting. I can go for a 20-minute walk. I can, walk the dog. I can make sure that I eat a really good salad. I can go to bed earlier the night before. In the time leading up to that meeting, I can choose to spend 15 minutes away from my computer reading. I can get some sunlight. I can do things that actually give value back to me. And it in turn will make me more effective in that meeting. I am less reactive to negative things that come out of it. And I also don't feel like I've given up my entire day to this really stressful thing that I'm dealing with. So ultimately, the bottom line truth is this: most of our work is not at our computer, and we're only productive about 4 to 5 hours a day. Again, studies show that it actually can be quite a bit less than that. But you're an asset to your company whenever you care about yourself. And I so firmly believe that, again, as an employee and as a manager, that people who care about themselves tend to do better work. Their projects are more elegant. They are more thoughtful to the user experience. And I think that by doing that, you also reclaim some of the 8 hours that you perceive yourself to be sitting at your desk, rather than throwing it away to things like Facebook or Californian hurricanes. Each action is either a net negative or a net positive, and that's true. I cannot say how true that is. And I kind of think about it in the same way of like Super Mario Brothers, where the Mario jumps up and he grabs the coin, and you can have an endless amount of coins, right? You can get as many coins as you want, and whenever you get enough, it transfers into a life. Or after so many times of getting hit, you die, and it's like 1 or 2 times. And so there is a bottoming out if you have too much negativity. But there's no bottoming out on positivity. And so the things that you fill your time with can really fill up the rest of your life. But whenever you actually get to a point where the positive and the negative outweighs the positive, I think you hit burnout. And it seems like in the email geeks community, we see this a lot as well, where people say, well, I'm perfectly fine with my job. It's really stressful, but I'm used to it. And it's like, ugh, it's a really scary place to be, because you have an opportunity to give more back to yourself and deal with the positive job or deal with the negative job, or you can go find an environment that's more conducive to the balance that you need. And so I'll say this, don't overdraw your bank account. Don't get to 0 or even negative, because that's when I start to see people in email geeks really talking about just, not being sure what the next step is. And my last thing to share with you is comfort should scare the hell out of you, right? Being comfortable is not a long-term viable plan. If you have work that is so predictable, and you're comfortable with that level of work, and you're comfortable with that pay, and you're comfortable with your home life, right? You're probably not growing. And growth happens in the stressful environment. Stress is growth, right? The growth is the outcome of stress. But you get to decide the kind of stress that you deal with or how you manage it. And so if you spend a little bit less time focusing on the really quick dopamine hits, and you start to think about getting the really larger, longer lasting, healthier dopamine hits, then you are moving towards eustress. And growth happens in eustress just as it happens in distress. Comfort is living in between and just being okay with it. I was reading a book recently about marriage counseling, not related to my personal life, but it was a good book on therapy. And the woman said, the scariest thing she sees in her office is that couples that come in and they don't argue. They don't have anything to say to each other. They're just complacent about the whole thing. And that means that you're probably in a really, really unhealthy place because you've just decided to box it up and not deal with it anymore. So if you can describe the way that you feel about your work as really comfortable, you should probably be scared. And for that reason, I have a mission for you if you choose to accept it. And this is your mission. It is 10 items that I would recommend everybody do every 6 months. Maybe not all of them every 6 months, but I would say for anybody that's listening to my talk here, try to do these in the next 6 months, and then take the ones that you really like and make sure that you do them frequently enough to be getting the benefits of them. Number one, take a day off to do anything that you want and be honest with your team about it. When somebody says, "Oh, why are you taking Monday off?" Because I want to. Because I want to spend time with people that I care about, because I need a break from this place. Whatever the reason may be, again, do no harm. But make sure that you are honest with them. You should be able to own it. Go eat at a restaurant alone. I think too few people do this, but you can order whatever you want. You don't have to worry about what is on your face or what gets on your t-shirt, read a book. You can, you can read your phone if you want to, just try to keep it to something a little bit lighter, but just enjoy it. Just enjoy the time alone, the downtime, and be comfortable with your own thoughts. And tip 30%. A lot of science shows that being very generous to other people actually brings us a lot of joy and dopamine, which is fantastic. If kindness can bring you dopamine, like, why not? Cook a meal from a country you've never heard of. It is really, really hard to be stressed about work or worried about finances or concerned about upcoming business trip or whatever it is, whenever you're trying to cook from a country you've never even heard of, a meal that you've never even considered with ingredients that you've never even thought of. It's not possible. And so that's a great way of turning off your mind for a short amount of time. Apply an interview for a new job. I actually think everybody should do this twice a year. I've done it once a year, or I've done it once this year myself. I think the importance here is you're not trying to find another job at all. You're doing three things. One, you're making sure that you're still marketable. And I think that is so important to your own comfort, so that the choice that you're making, staying at your current job, is the right one. Two, you're keeping your skills sharp, which is, again, fantastic, because we all know that changes can happen in a moment's notice. There have been tons of tech layoffs, and you should have those skills should you get laid off from the job that you've been at for a while. And then lastly, you do it because you want to make sure that you're happy where you're at. So I mentioned this to my manager recently, and I said, I always think that everybody should interview periodically. She said, I totally agree. She said, the problem is people get tied up in the shiny new thing. And that's true. The goal of this is to make sure that you still like the job that you have. And if for some reason, you feel sad about not getting an interview, or you feel sad about not getting an offer, that might tell you something about how you're actually feeling with your work. And honestly, I hope that it means that you stick right where you're at. Go into a room where you have that weird bag or box that everybody has. It might even be a full room. Throw away 95% of it. It is amazing how much physical clutter in our environment can actually cloud our minds, and you will feel like a completely different person, and feel like you accomplished something, which is great. Get some sun. Go sit outside every morning for 30 minutes. Do it for several days in a row. Science says that it'll actually increase your heart rate variability, which is a talk for another time. Google HRV if you want to know more about what that is. Clean your fridge, throw out any condiments that have added sugar. Added sugar sucks. Might as well get rid of it. But also, you probably haven't gone through your condiments in a while, and it's probably a good task to do. Turn off your phone for an entire day. Self-explanatory. Monday through Friday doesn't count if you're just going to stare at your computer anyways. So, pick a weekend. Try a workout that seems impossible. This is a big thing from, I think it's Michael Easter. He does a 2% newsletter, but you should have a 50-50 chance of actually completing that workout. And I did a HIIT workout a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't walk for several weeks. Actually, it was like 2 weeks. I don't think I sat down for a day. It was rough. Do it. See if you can do it. It'll give you a lot of confidence in your abilities. And then lastly, go to the doctor. Figure out the doctor's appointment that you have most been worried about going to. If it's a dentist or a OBGYN or whatever the case may be, that's the one you should pick. There's something in us that keeps us from doing the things that we know we need to do to care for ourselves. And it's important to be able to address that stuff head on. And so if you have a doctor's appointment where you've been kind of like, I really don't want to do this, I don't have the time for it, I'm a little bit concerned about what they might say, that's the one you should go to. And it's really important for your own self-care. So with these 10 things in mind, that concludes my talk. Thank you so much for coming. I'd love to hear how people are putting some of these practices to work for them. And I hope that my talk here has given you some strong ideas on, maybe how to break away from your desk a little bit more and how to give yourself a little bit more eustress versus distress, and in result, less burnout. So thank you very much.